my name is Wesley Enterline. I'm the Sustainability Director at UW-Whitewater. I've been in this position since 2008. So I've been around for a little while, one of the, I guess, elders of the group at this point. I was a two-time graduate of Whitewater as well, so I guess I got trapped in orbit basically, never left. My position came out of a student project that I participated in, so I have kind of a unique origin story where we built the position from the ground up, and I've just been kind of keep working on it ever since. I'll turn it over to my illustrious co-host, Dave.
Well, thankfully, I'm not as elderly as Wes. So I have been in this position less time than him. I started in 2013 as the sustainability coordinator here on campus at UW-Stevens Point, and have been in that position ever since. So yeah, looking forward to sort of running through this presentation with you to give you a brief overview for people, particularly who are new to this meeting or this group, what we do and sort of how we came to be. I think one of the things to note is, as Wes and I were sort of planning for this session, one of the things we really wanted to do is sort of just make it more of a back and forth conversation. So you're not going to see any PowerPoints from us or anything like that. We're just going to sort of go through it and give you some of the information about who we are and how we got here. So just in terms of what you can expect over the next half an hour or so.
Mostly, we didn't really want to deprive you of the option to have full screen Wes or Dave view, you know, because PowerPoint slide would distract from that. So, you know, you're encouraged to go to full screen Wes or Dave view to really get the immersive experience here.
Get the full effect.
So I'll start a little bit with the history that I kind of briefly touched on. The earliest positions that we saw form in the UW system were right around 2008. My own position started as a part-time project position that ended up going full-time in 2010. I think Kate might have been the first official position at a campus back in 2008. I think early 2008, I was more mid. I know Sarah's on the call from Stout. She was one of the earliest positions as well, and she's still in her position. So, you know, once we get in here, I guess we're never leaving, huh? There's several campuses that have been successful in continuing those positions. One story from Superior is not so successful. They got a position and immediately saw it removed about a year later. So the road for every campus is a little bit different, but some of the earliest efforts really kind of centered around the climate commitments, which was under the American College and University President's Climate Commitment back in that decade, which is kind of fun to measure in decades now. There was a UW system sustainability position that we established, and Dave and I were trying to rack our brains, think about exactly what we could say about this position, but we figured rather than trying to come up with something unique, we would just go straight to the source and see if we could get an outside speaker to talk a little bit about that UW system position. We got our outside speaker to take herself off mute though.
Okay, old person here trying to figure out Zoom. So hopefully I didn't blur myself too much when they tell you to improve your face. So it's, I'm up in Anchorage, Alaska, and it's like 6:30 in the morning or something crazy up here. So I had to bring in extra lights, trying to lighten the room up. Yeah, at UW System, my job just kind of kept morphing over the years. I started I ran a solid waste research program, but then that got cut in half one of the budget years. So then I made myself into a waste minimization manager, which was kind of the forefront of being a sustainability coordinator. And then what really prompted I kind of could make up my name and change my business cards at will because I was in a department that never really knew what I did. But what really prompted the sustainability movement was Kate Nelson went up to some mucky mucks at a Board of Regent meeting that they held at UW-Milwaukee and gave them hell. And they came back to UW System and kind of more formalized my position. And then what I saw myself as is the coordinator of your positions. And it started out, a lot of recycling coordinators stepped into the role. facilities people. Like we had Dusty up there in Superior and Mark in River Falls. You know, a lot of, and then also from Surplus. So we brought in people from many places. And one of the few campuses that went out and hired somebody totally just sustainability was UW-Oshkosh. It was more of a faculty role. And that person didn't last all that long. Found out most of us that stayed around a long time already had some kind of connection to the campus. Kate's probably the exception of that rule. So, and then it grew. Then you guys got more expertise and came in as sustainability coordinators. But it was mostly just to gather you, somebody from each campus and get you talking to each other. And I'm really happy to see a lot of familiar faces today. Once I figure out how to scroll over and see the rest of you. But I did talk to Tim McLean, who was an auditor with System. He was one of the original committee members. And then if some of you remember Greta Aliv, she was our student who was awesome. We made her do everything. Our intern, we would send her to the Board of Regents to ask for money because they listened to her. So we were able to obtain funds to cover a lot of the System meetings. We had free registration for students and free hotel rooms for students and meals and everything. So that was one of our big successes. And I did talk to Greta and Tim this week, and neither of them has a real strong memory of what we did when either. So I don't feel quite as bad since I'm the oldest of those three. But we did have some, oh, hi, Tim. Okay, Tim's waving up on top. And I'm glad he joined us. But we did have some really good gatherings. Like we had a camp out at Devil's Lake State Park with our UW Baraboo meeting, and lots of good memories. And I'm sure you are all making some new ones. So I'll send it back over to the youngsters there.
Awesome. Thank you, Eileen. We really appreciate you joining us this morning.
Sure.
Yeah, a lot of everything that we're doing now is kind of built on the initial efforts that Eileen undertook to, you know, kind of network us, bring us together. So we're really thankful to be able to carry on that tradition. You know, we had to step up and find a new programmer. So a lot of times we rely on Dave to be our programmer for all things social. And he's been keeping that tradition alive pretty well, I'd say. So everything kind of morphed then into, you know, what you see now, but we had to go through a little bit more growing. And I think UW-Madison's Office of Sustainability was a big leap forward for UW System sustainability efforts. You know, Madison kind of lagged behind us for several years by not having an official office and some interim directors and things like that. Then all of a sudden they just kind of started exploding onto the scene. Now, if you look around the room, you'll see UW-Madison folks of all different types and different positions. So we got Kathy in the room, who's one of the early leaders of the efforts on sustainability at Madison. And now we're happy to have Missy on board. And she joined up, I believe it was in 2018. And this coincided pretty well with the UW System meeting we had in Stevens Point, where a lot of these working groups started kind of coming into the mindset. We started talking about communication is really kind of a big effort, and then the communications kind of morphed into working groups into the next meeting. So what you see now is really, in my mind, a great kind of culmination of the efforts that we've put in over the last decade or so to really be intentional about networking with each other and collaborating with each other as much as possible. So we'll talk a little bit about who we are. Dave.
Yes, Wes. Well, I would love to if you give me that opportunity. You know, just go on and on all the time. So, and I want to say just another thank you to Eileen for joining us today and for all of her early work. As you heard her say, one of her things was to bring us together socially to get us working. And you know, clearly here we are still doing that even years later without direct leadership. So I think it really speaks to the great job that that got started in this process and set us off on this path. So I think a couple of things to talk about. So there are lots of different people, as Wes mentioned, who make up this sort of working group. For us, we've sort of broken it down in a couple of different ways. So one is we have primary contacts. We don't have those on all of the campuses, but we have them on a majority at this point. And traditionally, this is just the person designated as the sustainability coordinator or the sustainability director or the chief sustainability officer. So there's all sorts of fancy foo-foo names that we throw around with that, but that is essentially that primary contact. And so there's a mailing list for people when we're just having that sort of direct communication. And then there's what we call secondary contacts. These are people who sort of are working in sustainability, but may not be the lead point person. And so you see these people coming into our group and organization from all sorts of ways. We have people who run and deal with campus gardens and that sort of aspect. We have people who are working in surplus. We have people working in facilities, waste management, sort of some faculty programs, depending on which institutions you're at. You may seem engaged in that. So it starts to really show the expanse of how the sustainability program has grown over the years. I think, as you heard earlier, it sort of started as a recycling and has really just sort of continued to balloon out from there. And I think as that happens, we tend to get more and more sort of secondary contacts and people coming into the equation, which is really great because we're really trying to bring that home. Another key component that has started to develop more and more is the faculty. So I think as many of us do STARS reporting and integrate curriculum research work into our campuses and sort of do that evaluation, we've seen more and more faculty sort of start to come on board and take interest. Some campuses has even developed faculty fellow programs. Those have sort of come and go as the budgets come and go and as the other stresses of the job come and go. But they're definitely there and play an important role. And then definitely last but not least, I think is our students. And students come to us in a lot of different ways. So some of them, obviously they rotate through first of all. So for all of us elderly folks who have been around and doing this for a while, I want to say thank you to the students who are here and who continue to come through and work with us because speaking for myself and Wes, it's really invigorating. I think it definitely keeps us young, kind of, but it definitely reminds us why we're here doing the work. And so some of that, that's always a sort of invigorating source for us. Some of that comes through student government. Some of that comes through student orgs. Some of that comes through different internship programs that students are doing on campus. But that really sort of starts to bring a much more fuller integration because then you've got, sort of administrators and operational people working. You've got faculty and staff doing research, and you've got students who essentially help keep our envelope pushed, which I think we all appreciate because we know there's a lot of work to be done. So we have to at times, and I think more and more you're starting to see, we also get some outside people who are starting to take interest. So I think the longer we establish as a group, you sort of start to see other governmental entities coming in, you see corporations, nonprofits, all starting to sort of go, hey, what are you all doing? How can we get involved in that? And so I think that's also a next place where we're probably going to see continued growth and sort of expansion. So that's a bit of who we are.
What are we all doing? That's an excellent question, Dave. Something I think I'm going to answer with a long overview of those different items.
Well, I wish you would, because I don't want to do it.
Thank you. Yes, I'm all over it, buddy. So what we do, first and foremost, especially when Dave and I sit down and think about what we do, we think of networking first. I think and I don't want to get all sappy right away in the morning here, I got to wait till the afternoon to get my cry in today. But, I really do it just because I want to connect with other people doing this kind of work. So there's a lot of professional reasons why we would want to network with each other on a regular basis. There's a lot of advantages to be drawn from each other's work. But personally, when you start to do this kind of work in a small department, maybe you're just a single position with some student support, or maybe you do have a small team, but often it feels like it's kind of like us against the world. We're working at an institutional level with, very small staffs. So there's a certain amount of commiseration that can come into this where we can, kind of drown our sorrow, so to speak, with some of the challenges we face, but also then stop and celebrate the successes that we have with each other. So I think best practices collaboration is kind of the obvious reason why we'd want to network, but there's really kind of a personal value. Some of my closest friends I've gotten to know through this group. The time that we've spent either at UW system meetings or some of the additional meetups that we've had over the course of the years has been really valuable to me personally. So there's a lot of, it's a lot of, you get out what you put into it. And for those of us who have put in a lot to this larger group, I think we've gotten out just as much. So I'm really happy with how everything's gone on the networking side. There's also kind of this shared reality of what we have to deal with within the state of Wisconsin and within UW system. So, when we're trying to, fight the system or take on the man or whatever, however you want to phrase our, kind of epic battle against the forces of unsustainability, it helps to have a team, a group to speak with a louder voice together. So our shared voice is way more effective than our voices individually at that higher level. So a lot of the work that we've done has really been focused on trying to make that influence at the higher level. And we also want all sustainability professionals to operate at a higher level, so we're all more effective. So we can use meetings like this to foster professional development. Cross collaboration between campuses really is more difficult. It takes a little bit more work, and I think it flexes some unfamiliar muscles. So when we start working with each other a little bit more, we get used to working across different groups, and then we can look as swole as Dave up there.
Awesome. Right here. See that? Big.
Swole is a word I learned recently, Dave. So you can use that all you want. Like we do in our individual campuses, we're always looking for ways to better engage our students. And I think having students participate in this meeting especially, there's been a lot of great kind of like takeaways where students can keep that collaboration going outside of the meeting for the rest of the year. And this is a great way to kind of reconnect new students that might be coming into the fold to replace the students that have graduated. And really, then the power of addressing big systemic problems like climate change to get activated, because we have a lot of people working together from across different campuses with a shared message. So there's a lot of value in doing that when you want to have those big conversations. And then, of course, we just want to represent. We want to make Wisconsin look good. We're doing sustainability work here. We go to national conferences. We're going to meet up. We're going to try to stay in the loop with each other, get our group picture, send it into ASHE so they know that we're there. So there's a lot of value just in like repping Wisconsin however we can and showing that we're doing stuff.
And to follow up on Wes's repping nationally, for a couple of years now, ASHE has continued to use our UW system photo to represent what sustainability looks like as a gathering group. And I think for those of us who make it to that conference, we take a certain amount of pride with that, given that we are a sort of uncoordinated hodgepodge of individuals that just get together because we think it's cool. So there's a lot of pride coming in that little photo. One of the things that we wanted to cover is sort of the annual meeting. So Eileen sort of brought that up, that was a process that was started under sort of her tenure. It's definitely taken some different shapes since she's left. But over time, what we've seen develop is a sort of rotating campus location. So if you caught Mark's early introduction, you know that theoretically we're all virtually in River Falls right now, enjoying the splendor up there. And I think most of us are probably pretty disappointed that we are not actually there together. So
I think Mark can host next year too, though. That's okay. He can make it up to us.
That sounds good. Just like ASHE coming to Milwaukee next year.
Yeah, they'll be back.
We'll just call it a rain date. But part of our structure as a group has been to continue to have this annual meeting. And so it tends to rotate around the campuses. It sort of has a nice history now at this point. I think it's been rotating to different campuses for about the last 7 or 8 years. As that's happened, we started to develop some fun traditions along the way. And so it's sort of a nice way for us to be able to see the state and see each other's campuses and our work really directly. I think that's one of the biggest things is it's good to have the meetings that we have and to talk, but it's really something different when you can actually step foot on somebody else's campus and see all of the great work that we're doing. One of the things that is important to note is that this is called a UW System Sustainability Meeting and not a conference. I think as we continue to progress, that's going to become less important. As noted earlier, it used to be pretty much provided with funding from the system, but because of that, it needed to be a meeting and not a conference. I think particularly around food was the main concern. But that's also shifted over time. There has been more responsibility taken by the sustainability departments across the system to help finance this. One of the things that I think is really great, like for example, we have August Ball, who's going to be here today and tomorrow, and she's being funded through a collaboration of all of our sustainability departments across the campus. So I think it just really speaks to that collaborative nature and what we can sort of pull together. One of the things too, as it relates to traditions, is we have historically started to have a local food fair type of meal with a little bit of one-upsmanship amongst us. Wes sort of got us started on that train a few years ago when we had our meeting at Whitewater, and we've really sort of taken that bull by the horns and really ran with it. And so for those of you who have been around the last few years, you know that the meals and the conversation in the evening has been great. And so for those of you who can't be here this year in person, which is all of us, hopefully next year we can get right back on that train. It's a really wonderful way to promote our sustainability ethics while also having some great food. And then lastly, I think, you know, as also mentioned, and I just want to reiterate Mark's comments from the opening, big shout out to our planning crew that has taken on this mission. So Jake, Laura, Mark, and Ashley, here's a little round of applause for you for all of your work in getting this annual meeting together. We know it's a ton of work, and so this is sort of the next step of what you see. I think as this program and these meetings have rotated, there's been enough of us now who've had to do it who go, this is really a lot of work. And so if we could come up with a way to lessen that load, that would be great. And so that's sort of what the working groups development has come to do. They're there to sort of support and help with logistics and just sort of keep it going through the process. So that way these annual meetings don't just fall on the shoulders of one person. So, and so this is our big event. Essentially, as a group, we do it once a year. Typically in the fall, it rotates and then just bounces around based on when HEE has their conference. Did I hit all the points, Wes?
I think you did a wonderful job. I think you did forget to mention that Mark was going to personally home cook locally sourced meals for all of us, and we could go pick them up at his house. I think that's what I heard. Maybe that's fake news though.
Yeah, I keep hearing that too, but definitely fake news.
Oh,
I did have a pretty good meal planned for tonight, which I had to cancel, but it probably wouldn't have beat some of the other ones, but it would have been pretty good.
Yeah, well, you can send the menu and then we can lick our screen, I guess, and get the experience.
With COVID, you shouldn't be licking things.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Note to self.
Note to self. Well, there's been a little bit of talk about working groups, so I'll just kind of run through the list real quick. We're going to hear more about working groups kind of throughout the conference, but especially tomorrow, we're doing an update and a conversation around kind of where we stand with all the current working groups. So energy benchmarking is a group that gets into some of the more technical discussions around how to improve our energy efficiency and really measure our energy usage so we can create better kind of long-term targets for achieving better efficiency. So it's very interesting deep dive into that specific area of sustainability, but it's a very important piece because it ties into climate so well, as well as budget, especially these days. For the STARS working group, pretty self-explanatory. We focus on the HE STARS assessment, and really the goal is to try to find out what responses we can share amongst our different campuses. So when we each do STARS, it's a little bit of an easier lift. So this is just like a more formal way of everyone copying my work. But obviously that's what everyone else is doing. I know how it works. Kidding.
That works sometimes, though, Wes. It's questionable at best.
Questionable at best. Is it? It's a process of refinement, always. The climate advocacy group, I was kind of wondering how to describe this one because it's been kind of an interesting ride. I kind of think of it as like a think tank in a way. We spent a lot of time kind of exploring the different issues, and I don't know if we really kind of found a definitive direction yet, but there's been really interesting conversations about the bigger picture of climate change within the state and our role in that as system campuses. The system position group is obviously focused on bringing Eileen out of retirement and installing her again. See, now, Eileen, you know how to use Zoom, so you can just work remotely. So we got all the problems solved. But, basically, Kate is kind of taking up the quest that she took up a long time ago to get somebody at system designated to be kind of our contact so we can have better communication with the administration office. So that's been that group. System goals is, again, kind of looking at the higher level shared vision of sustainability as a system and the direction we're heading. Then finally, of course, annual meeting group we've already talked about. But that's going to be a really kind of important way to keep these meetings alive and make sure that the burden doesn't fall too heavily on any particular campus.
And so with all of that, what we need to do is, I know you're all wondering, well, how do we keep up with all of this information? Where do I find all this data? Well, let me tell you about how that can be. So one of the things we have to do, or that we have in line, is a Google Drive system that was set up some time ago. I'm going to actually share my screen just to give you a quick view of what that looks like. If I can make that work.
Just to give you a time check, Dave, we got about 3 minutes.
On it, buddy. Don't you worry. I'm all about finishing on time.
Attaboy.
So this is just a Google Drive that you can see that was set up. It has a lot of our reporting working groups in it that Wes mentioned. And so this is just where we keep track of a lot of the data that we're working on. So if you are interested in joining a working group or getting more integrated, we can give you access to this. You can see it's only got 73 people right now. So it's not everyone that gets in here, but just so you sort of understand how our collaboration process works, this is the medium that we've chosen to use. Another big thing that we sort of, I say, collectively manage is our Facebook page and our Twitter account. And so you can see we've got a lot of content that's sort of coming out and that we continue to push out through there and sort of grow that. And so that's another thing that's done sort of collectively. So if you're interested in sort of getting more information, who can we contact to get access to the Google Drive? I would say Ashley, but I think she's going to be leaving soon, so I'm not sure who to pass that buck to. But Ashley's typing away and she'll tell us who she's passing it to, I'm sure. And so, so we have those shared drives. We sort of have that traditional social media. Another big thing that we do to sort of stay up to date with one another is we have a monthly call. And so this has been a sort of newer development in the last few years, but it's a way to keep us just integrated with each other. We sort of go through campus updates, and then we talk about some of the working group updates and just sort of keep the train going forward with that process. And so that's another sort of communication that we use. And then lastly, we've just got some good old-fashioned email. So we've got a couple of different listservs that are managed out of the UW-Whitewater office. And so when we have larger sort of communiques that need to go out to either those primary contacts that I mentioned earlier or the secondary contacts, like, hey, guess what? Our annual meeting is coming up and this is what we're doing. We use that to sort of help get that word out and spread out to campus. And that's another thing too that you can easily sign up for. Just by getting in contact with whoever is your local primary contact on your campus, they can sort of work through that process of getting your name added, or you can just talk to Wes directly during this meeting and say, hey, I'd like to get on that list there, and we can help with this. So I think pretty much that gives us our time, which is 10:15. So in closing, that gives you a pretty good overview, I hope, of sort of who we are, what we do, how we sort of operate. And Wes, do you have anything else you want to add before we turn this ball back over to somebody else?
I'd say just because we're at time, if you got any questions to follow up with, I saw a couple kind of come in. Feel free to drop them in the chat. Ashley and I can get back to those, but we want to try to keep things on time here. So we'll go ahead and turn it back over to our MCs.